Welcome to the Capital News. I'm your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me. The title of today's podcast, Suez Canal Traffic Jam. I'm sure many of you are aware of the story that is taking place over in the Suez Canal, one of the major waterways for global trade. We have an article out of the BBC that does a pretty good job highlighting what one of these mega ships actually is, because that's what got stuck over there, and we have a tremendous amount of shipping vessels just waiting for this huge vessel to be moved. Now, I don't know if, according to the story, according to some of these sources, the vessel got stuck due to high winds. I'm not a Navy guy. I'm not somebody who's ever captained one of these boats or was ever a crew on one of these boats. I can't speak intelligently enough on this matter. But at least right now, the story is high winds was at least part of this problem. Now, of course, this story has been plastered all over social media. And as I read various articles and comments, I have some people stating, now I don't know them personally, but I have people stating that they are experts or somebody who has several years of experience working on these boats, understanding how they operate. And somebody went so far to make the claim that the only way that this could have happened in the position in which this vessel sits, it had to have been intentional. Now, I hope that's not the case. But again, I can't speak intelligently enough, but that was very interesting for somebody to come out and make that statement, to claim that they've worked on these boats for 20 some odd years and that this could only have happened intentionally. Now, it is my understanding through other news reports that this is not just the captain of the vessel who would have been maneuvering this vessel through the Suez Canal. He would have been working in conjunction and in tandem with the tugboat captain. So you would think constant communication between the vessel and the tugboat to prevent such a thing from happening. And I would also have to assume that the captain of both the vessel and the tugboat happen to know what they're doing. They have to know what they're doing, especially the captain of the vessel. I mean, there's just too much cargo on there, millions and millions of dollars, a lot of risk. So, and how often do we ever hear of something like this happening? So, yeah, maybe it was high winds, maybe it was intentional. Will we ever know? I don't know. But the longer that this drags out, the bigger the problem's going to be. I mean, this is just crazy, isn't it? This is just more stuff to add on to the pile of 2020 and now 2021. If it's not tens of thousands of earthquakes in Iceland causing a volcanic eruption that hasn't erupted, a volcano that hasn't erupted in 800-900 years, if it isn't, floods in parts of Australia, the worst seen in 60 years, the hits just keep on coming, and now we have a major vessel stuck in one of the busiest waterways on the planet. And of course, it happens to be in the Middle East too, which of course, there's a lot of dry kindling there for a lot of things to go wrong. And the longer this, of course, stays stuck in the Suez Canal, the worse things are going to get for global trade, which is already suffering from massive supply chain disruptions as it is. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens after this settles with who ends up getting sued, how many insurance companies have to pay out a lot of money. If that's the case, again, I'm not well-rounded enough to understand the insurance intricacies of these vessels and international trade, but nonetheless, one would have to assume that there is insurance involved, and because of this, things are delayed. Time is money. Somebody's going to get sued. Some insurance company is going to have to pay something somewhere, I would have to imagine. Okay, now, of course, if it really takes a long time, these boats are probably going to have to do a U-turn and make their way around Africa, which, of course, is just going to take another week to 10 days, according to some of the reports that I've come across, if that should happen. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully they get this boat unstuck. Now, I am doing this podcast well later than I typically do, and the most recent news updates that I have seen is it is still stuck. Okay, and some of the images that we have seen today, all I see is one bulldozer or one front-end loader and a couple of guys. Now, I would hope that there are more people on the ground than that to move a ship of this size in a waterway that's this important to global trade. You would think there would be basically an army of people on the ground attempting to move this ship. Excavators, bulldozers, front-end loaders, you name it. Any type of heavy equipment would be there. I can only imagine if something like this were to happen in, say, China, the way that they move. All the problems that they have, they want to set something up, they want to move, they move. So I find it somewhat laughable and comical. Now, again, I could be wrong. I'm sure maybe there are more people there. But some of the photos that are being plastered out there in the media reports, you got a backhoe, a front-end loader, and a couple people standing there. I just don't think that's going to do it. But I guess that's par for the course. What else can we expect? I'll read an article from the BBC here shortly on that with some interesting information on the size of this vessel, and it puts it into perspective. So we'll get to that in a bit. Market performance, we have the dollar index at 92.60 on the dollar index, hitting a level we have not seen since November, putting downward pressure on some commodities, precious metals, and equities. Bitcoin is at $53,100 a coin, and some of the major cross-currency pairs against the U.S. dollar have taken a hit over the recent days as well. Now, an interesting thing with Bitcoin, we had Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, etc., announcing today that he will be accepting Bitcoin to sell his Teslas. So if you have Bitcoin and you want to trade your Bitcoin to buy a Tesla, you can do so. And according to Mr. Musk, he is also claiming that once he receives the Bitcoin, once Tesla receives the Bitcoin, that it will not be exchanged for U.S. dollars or presumably euros or yuan because he has plants in international sales, which is interesting. Now, of course, everybody who buys a Tesla is not going to be purchasing it with, fiat currency, U.S. dollars, euros, yuan, what have you. But nonetheless, is that going to be enough to pay all of the bills? Is that going to be enough to pay all of the taxes? Is he going to have to sell at some point? What's going on here? And the initial knee-jerk reaction to this was, of course, a spike in Bitcoin, but it came down. And, of course, Bitcoin was trading as high as 61,000. And, again, now we're at 53,000. So we're in correction territory. A little bit lower, and we could be in a bear market, technically speaking, 20% down from a peak to where would we be, 48,000, somewhere in there would be about 20% decline from that recent high. So it's something to pay attention to. And, of course, this might just be a typical run-of-the-mill correction, and it may very well continue higher. But we had Dingbat Yellen and Chair Jay Powell continuing some testimony today and making comments today on cryptocurrencies and, of course, Bitcoin in particular. And both of them pretty much shrugged it off, pretty much saying it's not a threat to the U.S. dollar, that it uses up a lot of energy, it's not very efficient, blah, 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 blah. We know the facts. This doesn't deter anybody who is an extreme advocate for Bitcoin, no matter how many logical arguments you throw at them. Because that's the other interesting thing. Should central banks and or federal governments start to somehow regulate Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, what is that going to do to something like Bitcoin? Because, the whole story around Bitcoin, at least I thought, was that it was above, around, and beneath regulation. It was above, around, and beneath central authorities, such as central banks and federal governments. Well, if those central authorities come in and regulate it, well, what else do you have left? What is your argument now? What is your argument? Because that was the argument. You're going to use Bitcoin so you can get around the system. And believe me, I understand why people are frustrated with these institutions and want to get around the system. Nobody understands that more than me. I talk about that every single day. How fed up everybody should be with the system. But that doesn't mean just because somebody makes an argument, well, here's this technology, here's this cryptocurrency, that, well, that just must be the panacea. I don't buy into it. Not at all. And there's a number of reasons why that's the case. Now, some people are in Bitcoin just to make a quick buck. They're trying to trade it. They really don't care about it fundamentally. They're just trying to catch the wave. That's perfectly fine. It's your money, your risk. You do what you want. But there are some people that just want to hold it for forever and a day. And I think that that's a mistake. Now, of course, I could be proven wrong, but I don't think so. But time will tell, obviously. Because the other argument that a lot of Bitcoin proponents have is that it's all transparent. It's on the blockchain. You have this blockchain technology. You can see every single transaction that is taking place. So it's all about transparency. You can't see every transaction that's taking place with US dollars or euros or yuan or anything else for that matter. Okay? And that may very well be true. But the other thing that you have to question is if one of the strong arguments in support of Bitcoin is transparency, then shouldn't they have to answer the question, who created Bitcoin? Now, there's some figure named Satoshi out there. I don't know who he is, or she is, or they are. Is it one person, two people, a family, a corporation, a country? Nobody knows. So how can you claim on one hand that this is all about transparency? That's one of its selling points. And then on the other hand, you have no idea where it came from. Don't you think that's somewhat problematic? I mean, just for the sake of argument, imagine that you are an intelligence analyst. Aren't you going to question the source of the information that comes on your desk? Aren't you going to ask the other person or whoever you receive this report from, this piece of intelligence, aren't you going to ask who the source was so you can gauge the veracity of this report? Is it somebody that you have a long standing with that has given good information before? Or is this somebody you've never seen before or heard of? Or is it somebody you know is prone to give bad information? The source matters. What they want to do matters. So to try to attempt to sell me and everybody else on transparency, yet you don't know who created it and for what purpose, I can't buy into it. Sorry. Not fundamentally speaking. Can't do it. And then if this thing starts to get regulated, well, then how is this above and around and underneath government? How are you getting away from it? And furthermore, if you can see everything that's on the blockchain, well, then guess who else can see everything that's on the blockchain? The government. And if they see something that they don't like, or they think, whoa, well, we can tax this because this happens a lot, then they're going to do it. But if they want to make the argument, well, you can see everything on the blockchain, you can't see everything with fiat currencies, US dollars, euros, yuan, whatever, then aren't they sort of admitting that you can get around the government better in these fiat currencies because they can't track all of this stuff? Again, the arguments that are made from Bitcoin proponents just don't make any sense to me. They just don't. You want to talk about blockchain? That's a different story. That's a different story. That's here to stay. That's probably going to do perhaps miraculous things for society. I hope it does. But Bitcoin? I don't think so. I may very well be proven wrong. The price goes up. It may go higher. If that's your definition of success, then, I may be proven wrong, and that's perfectly fine. I don't expect to bat 1,000. I don't bat 1,000. Nobody does. But if you're going to tell me that something is going to be revolutionary, you have to be able to stand up to these types of questions. And I attempt to listen to and watch as many debates as I can in discussions on people who support Bitcoin and people who are against Bitcoin, or at least critical of it. And I never hear the supporters and the proponents of Bitcoin counteract sufficiently, in my mind, those criticisms of those who are critical of Bitcoin. There are other cryptocurrencies out there. More will be coming. They can do the same thing. They can do it better. They can do it with less energy. They can do more transactions. They can do them more quickly. What's the use case? Some other cryptocurrencies out there have a use case. They have a problem that is identified, and they are attempting to solve it or to make it better. Create a better mousetrap, if you will. That I understand. And that is being done by individuals who we can see. We know their names. We know their faces. Being done by corporations who are filed within the United States. So there can maybe be some legal liability. We know who to go after if it's a fraud or if something is nefarious. Who do you go after with Bitcoin? Shouldn't that matter? Again, just some questions to ask and to ponder. But everybody just buys it and they hope to become millionaires and billionaires. Okay, let's see. More power to you. And another thing I briefly want to discuss here before we get to some more market performance is Vice President Kamala Harris. I mean, of course, I don't like this woman. I don't care for this woman. I stated throughout 2019 in the political campaign that this woman was not the brightest bulb in the room. She proved that on the debate stage and on the campaign trail. However, I stated from the onset that this woman, you needed to pay attention to her. Not because of her brains, clearly, but because she is ruthless and is power hungry. And I said that is a dangerous combination. Because it is. You're going to go on a stage like that, you better be prepared to have one plan after the next. She didn't. Again, because she's not the brightest bulb. She's not prepared. And she continues to show that now that she's the vice president. But when you're going to be on that debate stage with somebody like Bernie Sanders and Pocahontas Elizabeth Warren, whatever you might think of those two, they have a plan for everything. And they're pretty good debaters. And you would think somebody such as Kamala Harris, who is supposedly supposed to be this fantastic lawyer and prosecutor, you would think she would have been a better debater. She wasn't. She wasn't. And the voters sent her packing, and rightly so. But when you're power hungry, when you're ruthless, and when you check a couple boxes, you're a woman, you're black, you're Asian, and you're of a party that cares about checking boxes. I don't care about checking boxes. I care about competence. I don't care about the color of your skin. I care about the content of your character. You see? I try to follow the words and the wisdom of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but a lot of people don't want to do that. Not on the left. They want to check boxes. Male, female, white, gay, straight, Hispanic, Latino, whatever. And, you know, it's a woman. Is she a woman? Is that how she identifies? Can she change her mind? These people wrap them up in a pretzel. Wrap themselves up into a pretzel. Again. But why I'm calling her out is because of her laugh. She is being asked some very serious questions as of late on a number of topics. And her knee-jerk reaction is to start laughing. Now, I happen to imagine that this is probably some sort of defense mechanism or coping mechanism to sort of ground herself, to sort of gather her thoughts, because she's nervous, because she doesn't know what she's doing. But it is, I think, very insulting and disrespectful to start laughing when you are asked various serious questions about very serious matters. You are the Vice President of the United States, so one would expect to be asked some very serious questions. And this woman just starts laughing, which drives me crazy. And I think it's probably just part two of some sociopathic or psychopathic tendency. Because that's what these people are. Left, right, it doesn't matter. Okay? But to me, this is just further evidence of it. To start laughing when you're asked these types of questions. So I just wanted to get that off my chest. I'm sure many of you have wondered the same thing or have been witnessing the same thing. It's just unprofessional. And as bad as the old senile man is at the top spot, I mean, how dangerous would it be with this woman in the top seat? I hope that doesn't happen. I really don't. I don't like Joe Biden. I don't like Kamala Harris. I don't like any of these people. Again, they give us reasons not to like them, not to respect them, and not to give them their vote. not to give them our vote. Yet people are going to continue to vote for them. They're going to continue to vote for Democrats. They're going to continue to vote for Republicans. You have to wake up. You have to rise above these two parties. Otherwise, all it's going to be is a continuation of the same old, same old. And unfortunately, it's getting worse. $1 trillion here, $2 trillion there, another $3 trillion coming. How much more do you need to see? Do you literally need to be wheelbarrowing U.S. dollars, Federal Reserve notes down the street before you realize, hey, I should have given up on these people a long time ago. I should have stopped supporting them. How much further do you have to go? Oh, my goodness. Continuing with market performance, overnight futures trading, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up about 0.3%. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100 are both in the green, up about 0.2%. Japanese cash trade put on a gain of 1.2%, a mixed bag across the pond in Europe. And of course, the news out of Europe with respect to Germany. So yesterday we had Chancellor Angela Merkel out of Germany announcing an Easter shutdown, only to be reversed today. So a little over 24 hours, I believe, passed, and she had changed her mind. Again, ladies and gentlemen, these people don't know what they're doing. If it was so important to put into effect an Easter lockdown, what changed all of a sudden within, 24 to 40 hours for you to change your mind? Could it be an election coming up in Germany, and she doesn't want all of these restrictions to be associated with her party? Because she's gone. She's leaving. And that's going to be a big political sea change in and of itself, because obviously Germany is a major economic and geopolitical power player. Or could it be because obviously she was afraid too of further social unrest, more protests, more riots, etc., etc. People are getting sick and tired of this stuff, and rightly so. But again, this is a Milgram experiment, and we'll go into that in deeper detail. But I just wanted to throw that out there for you. Australian cash trade putting on a gain of about 0.2%. Chinese stocks are relatively flat. WTI and Brent put on a gain during the day session. A lot of this off of the back of the Suez Canal traffic jam. But right now, both are in the red. WTI at $60.29. Brent, $63.60. Natural gas, $2.52. Gold and silver both down overnight. Gold is at $1,733 an ounce, and silver is at $24.98, so back again at a 24 handle. And copper is right at $4 a pound. Okay, so interesting to see that. Copper and silver, well, I should say silver hasn't been this low going back to basically around January at these levels. So that's something to be mindful of. Despite the fact that the Green New Deal's coming, $3 trillion, et cetera, you would think that would be a boost to both copper and silver. Now, we understand that silver, of course, is greatly manipulated, but nonetheless, you would think that there would be a natural bid for the white metal, but that does not seem to be the case. Any pullback, as far as I'm concerned, is a buying opportunity. On the bond front, Uncle Sam's 10-year junk note is yielding 1.62%. So continuing to watch the dollar index increase could give way to the dollar doom loop playing out, which is a scenario that never went away, as far as I'm concerned, and could put a lot of negative pressure on emerging markets. And we already witness a lot of economic, political, and social weakness in emerging markets to begin with. With the strengthening dollar, it could really hurt those economies further, and it could put downward pressure on commodity prices if this is sustained. And commodity prices have had a huge run-up. Nothing goes straight up, so for there to be a correction or a pullback in the short term is not going to be that big of a surprise to me. Net, they're going higher, but nothing goes straight up. So a lot of emerging markets are dependent on these types of commodities, and they have a lot of U.S. dollar-denominated debt. But if you have a dollar strengthening, you have commodities weakening, which is their main economic driver, you can see how this is going to cause a problem. So be on the lookout for it. And then lastly, we'll get to this BBC article. Container ship facts. Egypt's Suez Canal blocked by a massive boat. Anyone who has ever uttered the phrase, "we're going to need a bigger boat," has clearly never seen a megaship, because they are massive. But proving that bigger isn't always better, one of the humongous vessels has got stuck sideways along Egypt's Suez Canal. Strong winds pushed the ship off course, causing its hull to hit the bottom of the canal and get stuck, blocking the path of other vessels, which are trapped queuing in both directions. Megaships are huge boats that carry lots of cargo. The Suez Canal connects the Mediterranean to the Red Sea and is the shortest sea link between Asia and Europe. It has been used to transport goods for over 100 years, and today 12% of all global trade travels along its waters. That's amazing. The Suez Canal Authority, the SCA, said that it was working to refloat the giant ship using rescue and tug units. Its chairman, Admiral Osama Rabi, also said they had reopened an older section of the canal to ease the marine traffic caused by the incident, so at least that's good. Diggers are also working on the ground to try to free the ship, which is wedged into the side of the canal bank. The company that manages the container ship, Bernhard Schult Ship Management, said, quote, "all crew were safe," end quote, and there are no reports of injuries. But just how big are the biggest container ships, and how does something so massive float on water? Megaship facts. Megaships are some of the biggest moving objects ever made. The ship that got stuck in Egypt, called the Ever Given, is a quarter of a mile long, or roughly the length of 4 football pitches here in the U.S. soccer fields, and is one of the largest container ships in the world. The ship weighs a heavy 200,000 tons, 15 times as heavy as the Brooklyn Bridge, and about 20 times as heavy as the Eiffel Tower. It's also longer than the Eiffel Tower. Megaship engines weigh 2,300 tons. That's the weight of 328 African elephants, and there are 21 levels between the bridge and the engine room. For now, at least, it doesn't seem as if these huge ships will get any bigger, as they need to fit through shipping canals and into ports around the globe. Megaships can carry up to 20,000 containers, each around 6 meters long, which would be about 18 feet. If that number of containers was loaded onto a train, it would need to be 70 miles long, roughly the distance between Liverpool and Leeds. Again, this is the BBC, so obviously that's in England. And if the containers were stacked up end to end, they would reach all the way into space. That's incredible. Giant container ships don't have a deck, so the containers you can see are just the tip of the cargo being carried across the ocean. There are several hundreds more below, all stacked up in the belly of the ship. So how can something that is essentially a giant floating bathtub be strong enough to cope with stormy seas? Imagine a sandwich box with its lid on. It's pretty sturdy, but remove the lid or the deck for the purpose of this example, and you can easily bend the sides. The same applies to these big boats. So the ships have something called a torsion box added, which is a reinforced rim around the edge of the vessel to keep everything strong and sturdy. In the massive container ships, the torsion box also doubles up as a corridor that the crew can use to walk around the ship. That's pretty interesting. And container ships are very technologically advanced for good reason. A good example is the computer software that enables precise loading and unloading of containers and keeps the vessel balanced to stop it from tipping over. Using something called the ballast, the weight of the boat can be shifted at the touch of a button. Computer systems also mean that the boats can be crewed with as few as 13 people. That is incredible. Meanwhile, the cranes that load and unload container ships are up to 430 feet tall, about as tall as the Great Pyramid of Giza. That's incredible. Several million containers are traveling across the ocean on large cargo boats at any given time, and 90% of the world's goods are transported across water. That probably includes the device you're using to read this article. The shipping industry uses excuse me, they got this typed up here. The shipping industry is so big that if added to the list of the world's most polluting countries, it would come inside the top 6, producing more carbon emissions than most nations. However, because of the huge amounts of goods that the boats can transport, shipping is estimated to be several times more energy efficient than rail and road. So this is a big story. Obviously, 12% of all global trade passing through the Suez Canal is not small potatoes. The longer this lasts, the more money will be lost, the bigger problems will compound. We have enough supply chain disruptions as it is, and it'll just be interesting to see what the verdict is with respect to what actually caused this, if we will ever truly know. Was it intentional? If that was the case, why did they do it? If it was just simply because of the weather? I mean, we're blaming everything on the weather recently, right? It's a climate crisis. Everything is to blame on the weather. Economic data is to blame on the weather. A mega vessel getting stuck in the Suez Canal is to be blamed on the weather. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps both are not. But nonetheless, the Suez Canal has a traffic jam. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Koritis. Godspeed.